The disaster in New York is becoming more and more catastrophic. I don't even know how else to put it. I want to tell you a wonderful story about how the rule of my teacher and the founder of the philosophy I follow, namely Andrew Golambus, works 100%. In the cases of the new policies in New York and the communism they are trying to bring to this once great city. So, the Golambus rule, everything the government does always leads to results that are exactly the opposite of what was intended, which everyone enjoyed. The government, for example, wants to help the poor and gives them a pension, basically paying them for doing nothing. So they rob those who work and give it to those who do nothing. They probably think the government that this way they're helping those who do nothing. What's really happening? Let's figure it out. Those who wanted to create new jobs aren't doing it because now they either don't have the money or don't have enough. The people who should go work there accordingly don't go because the jobs haven't been created. They're not spending their days desperately searching for work or figuring out how to earn money. They just sit and wait for their monthly payment, which will help them stay at the bare minimum. That is, they have no new opportunities that could pull them out of this situation. This number, well, come on, to pull yourself out of this by your own bootstraps. But they're deprived of motivation and given just a small handout in a false sense, like nothing bad will happen to you. If anything happens, will come help. Well, in other words, it's not much and it's not good, but nothing terrible, so to speak, will always pull you out. So everything they think about, or what they're thinking about, those who constantly get all sorts of handouts and so on, is basically how to get more for themselves. Yes, from the government, bosses, or anyone. So the same government that steals money from those who work and gives it to those who don't work takes advantage of the hopes of the unemployed and promises them that if you vote for us again and keep us as the government, well, we'll increase our services, including giving you the same money, maybe even more. And besides that, we'll also give you free phones, free computers, free housing, free transportation, free food and drink vouchers. Of course, free. Don't forget healthcare, education, and basically everything else will be free for you. Why? Because if you choose us one more time, we'll steal even more from those who work. Well, I see. They planned one thing, but it turned out completely different. Well, which doesn't help the poor at all, but really helps whom?
Членам.
The government members. You guessed it. Now here's a story that will help you understand how it works. That's how it works, yes, and this story is, so to speak, from long ago. I couldn't even imagine, so to speak, Golambus. I read a lot, including Nelson, and suddenly, so to speak, I discovered this wonderful story. Here is one of the versions of the fall of the great Roman Empire. I can't guarantee it, but wow, it sounds very much like the truth. Why can't I guarantee it? Because I was born a little later than when the Roman Empire collapsed. The empire split into two parts. One part was conquered, so to speak, but the other continued to exist, quite seriously. It even had plans to go on the offensive and to win back the rest of the Roman Empire and restore its greatness and power. They had existed for 1,000 years and believed they would last a bit longer. Emperor Diocletian comes onto the scene, a good man who cared for his subjects who, well, the only thing is, well, he didn't understand anything about economics, didn't understand anything about psychology, and I strongly suspect didn't understand anything about politics either. But he was an emperor, which means apparently a cunning, evil, vindictive person who, well, eliminated everyone who stood in his way. And after that, he became the head of the Roman Empire. Forgive me, for God's sake, all of you who think he gained power some other way. I have never once seen anyone gain power in any other way. I'm not talking about democratic governments right now. That's why we end up with such weaklings. Because they have a different way of gaining power. You just have to be greedy, stupid, cunning, mean, and so on. It's not absolutely necessary to be violent, right? Although it helps. For several years, there was drought, heat, drought, and so on, and similar food products skyrocketed in price. Wishing to gain the sympathy and love of the people, Diocletian issues an edict. Well, it's like a presidential decree, as we would call it, right? In this edict, it is stated that 3,000 goods, mostly food products as I understand listed below, cannot be sold by merchants at prices higher than those before the drought. And before the drought, there were 3 times more products, much less water and effort were spent on them, and so on, so they could be sold cheaper and still make good money from it. If you sell all the products during the drought, which cost much more to grow and are in short supply, then those who sell them will get much less money than what they invested. Not just less money, but less than what they invested. That is, by selling products at prices below cost, you lose money. The more you sell, the more you lose. If you sell a little, you lose a little. If you sell a lot, you lose a lot. And now, since everyone understood this, they would start cheating and selling on the sly. There was a small note in this edict. So, how are we going to punish those who try to sell products cheaper than we said? Huh? Yes. Very simple. In those times, it was done easily. They would cut off your head. The sellers, in fact, might have had the idea to lock up all the products in a barn, put a lock on it, and not sell them, so they wouldn't lose money. Because every time you sell a little, you lose a little, and if you sell a lot, you lose a lot. And for this, Diocletian also had a brilliant idea. If you're a farmer or a food seller and you have the appropriate license, but you don't sell your products, then you'll get your head cut off. Well, all right, let's say a person decided this. I'll sell everything I have. To hell with it, I'll lose a lot of money, but at least I'll survive, I'll get by, I'll leave a little for myself to live on. I'll make it through until better times. Things will get back to normal, there won't be any more drought, and I'll start growing again. Everything will be fine again. No way. The people at the top thought about that a little too. They're not stupid, right? If you're a farmer and you have land for planting, and you don't grow anything on that land, then you'll get your head cut off. So in the end, farmers, food resellers, suppliers, all the people involved in growing, delivering, storing, and selling food realized no matter what they did, no matter how hard they tried, no matter how they twisted and turned, they would get their heads cut off. They didn't like that. They started running away en masse. From their lands, their farms, their cities, their warehouses. And of course, they fled with their families because back then, if there was no father, they would cut off the children's heads. Easily. Yeah? We live in slightly different times. Yeah, they don't cut off heads here. And now I want to tell you another interesting detail about what was happening. At the borders, in the border regions, who do you think served there? The sons of these very people served there. We're fleeing. They informed their sons. And we'll wait for you there on Aunt Frosia's birthday in the place where you and I once met 4 years ago, where the stream bends under the tall tree. Joking aside, mass desertion began in the legions, and the following year the empire didn't even produce half of what it used to grow each year. And besides that, an incredible number of defenders, border guards, fled and deserted from their regions, from the legions. Legions, not regions. I want to tell you right away that the empire didn't collapse immediately. Empires never collapse quickly. They realized it a few years before the barbarians started. Interesting, right? They would strike at the remaining legions, move inside, loot, kill, take the spoils, then go deeper and deeper. Year after year, less and less production. Year after year, less money for the legionnaires. Year after year, fewer legionnaires, and the Roman Empire collapsed. It's time for us, gentlemen, to move on to our story, where the main player is no longer Emperor Diocletian, but a city mayor who has exactly the same knowledge in economics, psychology, and everything else, just like the emperor who lived thousands of years ago. But the mayor of New York does exactly the same thing as the man who almost single-handedly brought the Roman Empire to collapse. I came across a video blogger whom I used to watch a lot, but lately, for some reason, I kinda lost track of him. His name is Cash Jordan. He likes to chuckle and joke around. He's a New York kind of guy. I don't know if he still lives in New York or not, but he's a typical New Yorker. Why am I bringing him up? Because he was talking about New York, and I thought, well, he's a New Yorker, so I should listen to what he has to say about New York. And by the way, he has like millions of subscribers, which is really not bad at all, right? So his viewers really like him. Let's listen to him together.
Rent in New York is frozen, so what's going to happen next?
Next, regarding the so-called rent freeze, Mayor Bill de Blasio made a campaign promise and kept it, which worries me. When you freeze rent, you don't freeze anything else. You definitely don't freeze everything else. You don't freeze insurance, bills, utilities, labor costs, the cost of replacing a boiler, repairing the roof or the elevator, and you definitely don't freeze property taxes. What?
This seems completely clear to us, but apparently it's not clear at all to Diocletian and Mamdana. So listen to this. You don't let the owners raise the prices for the products they produce or the rent. You don't let them raise the prices for the apartments they rent out. But you can't have any influence on the cost of water or the cost of everyone else's services or all the inputs needed to grow food or to repair and maintain houses and apartments. In other words, everything is going up, expenses are rising, and your costs are constantly increasing. But the only thing that isn't going up is your income. At some point, the increased expenses become greater than your income. Is that clear? I think it's crystal clear. Yes, and also the taxes collected by the empire, or the city, it doesn't matter, the island if you want. They also never decrease, but only, you're right, increase. Why do they increase, you may ask? And I'll tell you, because emperors and mayors really love money, and the more the better. All right, let's listen further.
The bills keep growing, and what happens? Many small landlords, not giant corporations, but an immigrant family owning a 6-unit building or an elderly couple with an income property, have to make an impossible choice. For example, what? Postpone repairs, leave apartments vacant because there's no money to renovate them, or sell. There are fewer apartments available. And when supply drops, guess what happens? Market rent gets paid. Market rent. Market.
Gets paid. So when it costs owners more to maintain an apartment than what they get from renting it out, they lock the door and don't rent it out. So Diocletian ordered to cut off the heads of everyone who wouldn't sell their goods if they had them, right? Well, Mamdani still, I emphasize, still can't cut off the heads of those who lock their doors and won't rent out their apartments. But he actually came up with something else, and you'll find out a bit later what he came up with. So a huge number of apartments will end up vacant, because it's impossible to rent them out for more than the expenses, which means it's actually more profitable not to rent them out at all than to rent them and lose money, so it's better just to wait it out. That makes sense, right? This is observable. Let's move on. Yes, one more thing. When there are fewer and fewer apartments for rent in the city, in the sector where there is no rent control, well, maybe I didn't explain it clearly. The part, so to speak, for the poorer people and so on is regulated, but the part for the, let's say, the rich, or simply those who have money is not regulated. I mean, well, it's too complicated to do without a staff, without a government, without this or that. So the city practically, so to speak, maybe, I don't know, but it seems to me that it's very difficult to do. So people who can't find an apartment there because there aren't enough of them start moving into the unregulated sector. And when there are a lot of people who want it and few apartments, what happens? I think you understand that the rental price goes up. Rent increases. People who used to rent for less money now either have to leave the city or have to rent for more money. Remember when I mentioned the law of bureaucracy at the start? When the state or the government starts doing something related to the economy, the result is always exactly the opposite of what they intended. That is probably the mayor of New York, although I don't think he's that crazy, knows what this will lead to. But maybe he thought, or at least said he thought, that he would help those who can't afford high rent, but he himself became the biggest factor in driving up rents in the city. But now comes the most interesting part. The city, that is, there are buildings that belong to the city, and the city naturally manages them, right? From that, the city naturally gets something out of it and controls it. It was shown positivism.
Какие-то черпает какие-то средства. И там творятся
How? No.
чудеса.
Oh, so the rent will go up and the city owns the building where the mayor is the landlord, and guess what's going on there?
New York. The Knicks came back from a 30-point deficit in the finals, which is interesting because that's exactly the percentage the mayor of New York is raising the rent for the tenants of these buildings behind me. What's going on? This is Tracy Towers in the Bronx, a Mitchell Lama project with 871 apartments built with government support to provide affordable housing for the middle class. And when I say support, I mean huge support in the form of taxes. The Department of Housing issued these buildings a loan of $148 million. In 2016, that's $170,000 of debt for each apartment. The current rent at Tracy Towers doesn't cover the loan payments and operating costs. You can't afford it. Each apartment loses about $100 a month.
Let me explain. A lot of money was spent on building this house. The money has to be paid back because it was borrowed from the bank. To pay back the money, you need to collect from each resident, let's say, about $1,000. Yes, then you can pay the mortgage. But when people moved in, the rent that was set for them, and they agreed to it because they were low income, was $900. And it turns out that there's a shortage of $100 from each tenant. And Mamdani, he immediately does what he forbids the building owners to do. He raises the rent by 30%, and it becomes $1,200. He gives $1,000 to the bank and keeps $200. One more time. The same thing that is strictly forbidden under threat of a huge fine for building owners and owners of houses and apartments in New York to do. Forbidden by whom? The answer is by the city mayors and city councils. They are doing exactly what they forbid others to do. They are doing it to others. And when they are asked why, they say, well, we have to pay off the mortgage. Madas.
The math doesn't add up, so Mamdani's administration is raising the rent. I thought we were freezing the rent. Well, that's only for apartments owned by greedy capitalists. But when an apartment is owned by socialists, you can safely raise the price. After all, we have no choice. We're not greedy. Oh no, but it gets worse. Let's compare Tracy Tower with this building right here. The rent is about the same. The debt here is much lower. But the property taxes, they're so high that the apartments here also lose about $100 a month. The math doesn't add up in either building. But the mayor is going to freeze the rent in this private building and raise it in this building that's controlled by the government. And if this private building goes bankrupt and the government takes it over and the math still doesn't add up, guess what they'll do? Oh, so this shows that in New York we have a scheme to make everyone poor and at the same time confiscate all private property. Let's wait and see. Life here won't become any more affordable.
Well, that's what I was telling you. In one case, the building belongs to private individuals, and the city imposes a huge tax on it, and the owners. By renting out the apartments, they lose $100 on each one. They're not allowed to raise the rent. That means today they have to rent the apartments to tenants at a price lower than what it actually costs them to maintain the building, including the mortgage, of course. So after some time, they'll either declare bankruptcy and then the city will take the building from them, or they'll just shut everything down, everything that's there, and quietly push all the tenants out. And the building will stand empty, deteriorate, and eventually fall apart. And the building on the other side of the street belongs to the city, and the city charges as much as it wants, from the tenants. If they want, they raise the price. That's how it is. Let's move on. Because the emperor of the Roman Empire and the mayor of New York have one thing in common. They don't answer to anyone for anything.
And if that private building goes bankrupt and the government takes it over and the numbers don't add up, you know what they'll do? They'll raise the rent. Oh, so that means there's a scheme in New York to make everyone poor and at the same time confiscate all private property. Nothing will get more affordable here, that's certain.
In actual words, all the ideas that Mayor Mamdani has are to confiscate 100% of the property in New York City from the people and make everything state-owned. A gift for us all. A return, so to speak, home to the motherland. Don't you think this is no longer even fascism, but just straight-up military communism?
That freezing rent could reduce the supply of housing and decrease investment in rental properties. And here's another irony. Almost a third of rent-controlled apartments are occupied by families with an income of over $100,000 a year. So it doesn't really help families in need. It's a benefit tied to the apartment, not to the person. And that means this whole rent freeze scheme basically bought 2 million votes. For the mayor of New York and the socialists who can now do whatever they want, it's pretty hard to vote against a politician who's paying you to stay in your own home, isn't it?
It turns out that people were told if they voted for Mayor Amdani, they would be able to pay much less for their rental apartments at the owner's expense, and the price wouldn't change at all, no matter what happened with inflation. And since the owners won't be able to hold out for long, of course, the city will requisition these houses and rent them out to tenants at even lower prices. For what? For voting. For the right people. You vote for me, and for that, I give you thousands of dollars as a gift at the expense of homeowners, capitalists. That's such a wonderful idea. Even Diocletian couldn't have come up with something like that. And we all wondered what kind of idiots vote for this Amdani. But it turns out they're not idiots. They're actually very smart, nasty creatures. Nasty creatures, but not stupid ones. Let's listen to what the emperor himself has to say. The emperor, sound to the wall.
And we're raising taxes on the richest residents of New York, instead of taking the last thing from those who have nothing. During this process, I remembered the words of the Austrian economist Friedrich Hayek. If socialists understood economics, they wouldn't be socialists. If recent months have shown us anything, it's that socialists understand economics as well as previous capitalists and can fix years of their mismanagement by using our principles.
Yes, the mayor understands how all this works. He is fully aware. He is smarter than the capitalists, even though we are heading toward a complete nightmare.
Well, that means, for example, that the city's water utility won't raise its rates either because you banned rent increases. If you banned rent increases, that means you won't charge more for your services either, right? No, that's not right. The city and the city authorities want to get money. They need it, and the more the better. That's why they raise the fees for their services, and water is a city service. Here, for example, take a look. Look.
The New York City Управление.
The New York Water Supply Authority has officially approved a 6% rate increase. So for the water that goes into these apartments, whether it's regular rent or frozen, it doesn't matter. Now you have to pay 6% more. And who pays for that? Well, that's the landlord. Landlords pay for hot and cold water as well as heating in many of these apartments, and this is just another tax. This is just the government reaching into landlords' pockets, preventing them from making more money. This whole situation is a disaster. And that's exactly why, due to rising taxes, insurance, labor costs, and water rates, the mayor is raising the rent in his own houses.
Many people I've interviewed, and I'm sure you've heard from, say things like, my roof is falling apart and the lobby hasn't been renovated in a century. So why is my rent going up? I totally understand their frustration. They need to understand that the costs of maintaining this housing have simply become unbearable, and the property owners have nothing to do with it. There are so many expenses that are controlled by the government itself.
Well, I think that's enough. We've spent enough time on this. This wonderful invention called, well, robbing the people of New York City. I think it's already clear that what is being proposed is fascism as a transitional period, and then the ultimate goal is complete communism. Exactly according to Marx, and, well, a bit according to Mao Zedong. So, gentlemen, if anyone wants to go to New York City, I have a suggestion. Buy a few houses there to give them away to people. If you don't give them away, they'll be taken from you. Or in no case should you buy anything in New York City. I just told you about one scheme for taking away private property, right? There are many such schemes. I hope you understand that Mamdani and his henchmen didn't come with just one scheme. This party, his new party, which is now called the Socialist Party. Well, they call themselves Socialist Democrats, Democratic Socialists, right? So that you would think they're Democrats. Nothing of the sort. So they want to carry out the same experiment that was done in the Soviet Union, North Korea, Vietnam, and a number of other countries, including, for example, our neighbor Cuba. Why are they doing this? Are they idiots? Idiots? No, they're not idiots. They're scumbags. Well, and of course they're liars. But I hope, ladies and gentlemen, you didn't expect that someone who calls himself a socialist would be honest, right? Well, we're not that stupid. He did say it honestly once. I'm a socialist, which means I'm a thief. Guys, I'm a thief. Well, what else do you expect from him, right? That's all for today. If you're interested in my thoughts between these videos, subscribe to the new channel. the new channel that I started on Telegram. It's called Leon Weitstein US, like the United States, Leon Weitstein US, using English letters, all four words together. Goodbye.